Amara's life took an unexpected turn, all because of a fleeting moment in the midst of a bustling crowd at the mall. There were no alarms blaring, no one screaming in panic, and not a single glance in her direction. But amid the hundreds of indifferent footsteps, she saw what no one else did. The teenage boy, tall, skinny, wearing a gray hoodie, out of place in the downstairs corridor, was unlike anyone else. He wasn't smiling, talking, and he wasn't holding any shopping bags. Instead, there was a look of restlessness, fumbling like someone lost outside of a safe place. While everyone else continued shopping, picking clothes, ordering coffee, posting on social media, Amara, from behind the convenience store counter, stopped. Just one glance, one skipped heartbeat, and she knew something was terribly wrong. Then her gaze drifted behind the boy, and two dark figures silently approached. They weren't shoppers. They didn't look like security either. They moved like shadows, close enough to threaten, yet far enough to avoid detection. Their steps were slow, even, their eyes never leaving the boy. Most people would have looked away. Most would have thought, not my problem. But Amara didn't, because her life was made up of small moments. Sharing half her meal with a homeless person, offering a seat to an elderly person, even though she had been standing for hours, quietly saving up change every night to buy medicine for her grandmother. She wasn't trained to handle danger. No badge, no gun, no backup. But what she had, it was more important than anything else. Courage that didn't require recognition. And in that moment, when everyone else turned away, Amara stepped forward. With a calm voice and a tone that pretended familiarity, she placed herself between the boy and the threat. She didn't know the boy was Barron Trump. She didn't know she had just thwarted an international kidnapping plot that had been planned for months. She only knew she couldn't stand still when someone needed help. A choice that seemed so small. One step, one word. A security badge swiped open to the back door. And from there, everything changed. Not just for Amara, but for the people she'd never meet. For the ones who held the fate of the nation. And sometimes it's those actions no one sees that become the seeds that shake the world. Amara Jackson, 17 years old, embodies quiet resilience in a city that never waits for anyone. In the aging neighborhood where she lives, the bricks peel, the windows are coated with dust from the passing years, and the stairs creak with every step. But to Amara, it's home. Though small, cramped, and filled with nothing of value, it's where the gentle laughter of her grandmother fills the air, where the soft yellow light always waits for her every evening after work. Grandmother Louise, the one who raised her since she could barely speak, was Amara's whole world. But now her grandmother's fragile heart was her biggest worry. Each weak beat reminded Amara that time waits for no one. Every medicine bottle in the fridge was a miracle bought with the little wages she saved up each day. There was no one else to rely on, no one to take the burden. So she stepped up. Every morning, Amara woke at 5 a.m., made breakfast for her grandmother, then caught the number 5 bus to school. After classes, when the bell rang to signal the end of the day, the other girls would gather at the bubble tea shop, chatting about clothes, dreaming of prom or the upcoming summer vacation. But Amara quietly turned a different way, toward the Diamond Center Mall, where she slipped into her blue uniform and donned her old name tag, starting her shift from afternoon until night. The work was far from glamorous. It was shelf stocking, barcode scanning, answering customers, and smiling even when her legs ached from exhaustion. But in her mind, there was always one goal: to save enough so her grandmother wouldn't have to worry about medications, and to accumulate enough for her dream of going to medical school, specializing in cardiology. She wasn't looking for pity, she was looking for opportunities, and she believed that as long as she kept moving forward, she would reach where she needed to go. Amara didn't have many friends. She didn't appear on social media, didn't follow the trends, and didn't have photo shoots like the other girls in her class. But she had something not everyone had: a strong heart that knew how to sacrifice, and a will that never bent in the face of hardship. For Amara, each passing day wasn't just a cycle, but a small step forward on the arduous journey she was quietly pursuing. And because of this, when that fateful moment came in the midst of the crowded people at Diamond Center, it was she, and not anyone else, who saw it. She was the one who acted. Because even when no one believes in miracles, Amara still believed. If you're strong enough and live kindly, sometime the miracle will find you. Amara Jackson, 17 years old, was the embodiment of quiet resilience in a city that never waits for anyone. In the rundown neighborhood where she lived, the bricks peeled away, the windows were covered with dust from time's passing, and the stairs creaked with every footstep. But to Amara, it was home, though small, cramped, and without anything of value. It was where the gentle laughter of her grandmother filled the air, where the soft yellow light always waited for her every evening after work. Grandmother Louise, the one who had raised her from when she could barely speak, was Amara's entire world. But now her grandmother's fragile heart was her greatest concern. Each weak heartbeat was a reminder that time waits for no one. Each bottle of medicine in the fridge was a miracle bought with the little wages she earned, carefully saved each day. There was no one else to rely on, no one to carry the burden. So she stepped up. Every morning, Amara woke at 5 a.m., made breakfast for her grandmother, then caught the number 5 bus to school. After classes, when the bell rang to signal the end of the day, the other girls would gather at the bubble tea shop, chatting about clothes, dreaming of prom or the upcoming summer vacation. But Amara quietly turned a different way, toward the Diamond Center Mall, where she slipped into her blue uniform and donned her old name tag, starting her shift from afternoon until night. The work was far from glamorous. It was shelf stocking, barcode scanning, answering customers, and smiling even when her legs ached from exhaustion. But in her mind, there was always one goal: to save enough so her grandmother wouldn't have to worry about medications, and to accumulate enough for her dream of going to medical school, specializing in cardiology. She wasn't looking for pity, she was looking for opportunities. And she believed that as long as she kept moving forward, she would reach where she needed to go. Amara didn't have many friends. She didn't appear on social media, didn't follow the trends, and didn't have photo shoots like the other girls in her class. But she had something not everyone had: a strong heart that knew how to sacrifice, and a will that never bent in the face of hardship. For Amara, each passing day wasn't just a cycle, but a small step forward on the arduous journey she was quietly pursuing. And because of this, when that fateful moment came in the midst of the crowded people at Diamond Center, it was she, and not anyone else, who saw it. She was the one who acted, because even when no one believes in miracles, Amara still believed. If you're strong enough and live kindly, sometimes the miracle will find you. Because Amara had a dream, not glamorous, not showy, but strong enough to keep her grounded through the struggles: to become a cardiologist. It wasn't a dream created by textbooks or movies. It came from the long nights she sat beside her grandmother Louise's bed, listening to her labored breathing, watching her frail hand clutch her own, and telling herself, one day, I won't let her suffer like this anymore. For Amara, that dream was a promise, not just to her grandmother, but to herself. She didn't yearn for the white coat because of admiration. She didn't dream of a big hospital because of status. She simply wanted to understand the heart enough to be able to keep the beat of the ones she loved. And further still, she wanted to heal people like her grandmother. The elderly, the weak, those living in slums, forgotten by the healthcare system, neglected by the world. Every day, Amara's life revolved around 3 points: school, her shift, and the small desk in her bedroom. No matter how exhausted she was, she opened her books. No matter how late her shift ran, she still managed to study for the upcoming SATs. There were nights she fell asleep on her notes, her face marked with ink, but the next morning, she would wake up at the same time to prepare breakfast for her grandmother. No one pushed her to do this. No one set deadlines for her success. But Amara knew clearly, if she gave up, Louise would have no hope. She had never allowed herself to be lazy, because for her, every wasted minute was a step further away from her dream. In a world where many lived to be seen, Amara lived to do what was right. And because she lived with this purpose, when the fateful moment came, she didn't hesitate. Because inside Amara burned one quiet truth: every heart saved was a thank you to her grandmother. The Tuesday afternoon began in the most familiar way. Diamond Center was as crowded as usual, the bright lights sparkling like every other day. Promotional signs flashed in every color. The scent of hot coffee from a nearby counter mixed with the sound of advertisements blasting from the overhead speakers. Families, couples, and students after class bustled about, laughing and chatting excitedly. The bustling rhythm of life swept everything along, and no one noticed a slim girl quietly wiping the glass of the mini convenience store at the corner of the first floor corridor. Amara Jackson. She wore a neat uniform, her slightly scratched name tag hung on her chest, her hair tied up neatly at the back of her head. Her eyes remained on the shelves, her hands occasionally adjusting a few bottles of water. Everything proceeded as it had in hundreds of afternoons before. For Amara, today was just another regular workday. There were no signs to indicate that in just a few minutes, her heart would be forced to make the most important decision of her life. But fate always chooses to appear quietly. Among the bustling crowd flowing through the main corridor, an unusual figure caught her eye. A tall, slender teenager in a gray hoodie, walking quietly with a lost expression, as if he were lost in his own world. No one paid attention to him. No one asked any questions. People just kept walking past. Except for Amara, with just one glance, a slight pause, and a brief flicker of confusion in his eyes. She knew something was wrong. It wasn't out of curiosity, nor was it because he was meddling in something unrelated. It was instinct, the same instinct that had made her share half of her lunch with a homeless person, that had made her carry her grandmother upstairs when the elevator broke, that had made her step back when someone else needed to move forward. And it was this very instinct that told her, stop, look closer. While the whole world kept moving, Amara turned around. And with just a small but courageous decision, she didn't just change someone's life. She would change her own life and rewrite an unexpected story. As she was bent over, rearranging some trays of bottled water, Amara glanced out at the large hallway in front. The crowd continued to flow as usual, hurried, noisy, indifferent. But in that moment, her gaze stopped at a tall, slender figure, frozen in the middle of the crowd. The gray hoodie covered most of his head, his hands awkwardly tucked into his pockets, his eyes scanning around as if looking for a way to escape. No bag, no shopping, no phone calls, no interaction with anyone. Far too unusual for a regular customer. Amara squinted. That boy, he looked familiar. The sharp features, the high nose, the somewhat lost eyes. And then, like a jolt of electricity, she froze. It was him, Barron Trump, the rarely seen son of the former president of the United States. Instantly, the surroundings blurred. A sense of responsibility, alertness, and a rapid heartbeat surged inside her. Something was wrong, very wrong, and she knew she had to act. But just a few seconds after recognizing Barron Trump, Amara felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Something was definitely off. Behind him, two large men were quietly following, Both were wearing black jackets and baseball caps pulled low, obscuring most of their faces. They didn't speak loudly, didn't seem hurried, but their footsteps kept pace with Barron. Close enough to follow, far enough to avoid suspicion. Their eyes were cold, sharp, scanning the surroundings with a terrifying level of control. Amara noticed they stayed clear of the security cameras, expertly maneuvering between the columns and groups of people, as if they had studied the layout of the center in advance. What made her feel suffocated was neither of them wore earpieces or badges, things that Secret Service agents always wear. One of them was gripping something tightly in his coat pocket, tense as if holding something. Without needing to see clearly, Amara knew it wasn't a phone. She had no proof. But her instincts told her Barron was in danger, and no one else noticed, except her. Amara stood frozen for a few seconds. A torrent of thoughts rushed through her mind like a whirlwind. Ignore it and pretend she didn't see anything? Call security while those men could strike at any moment? It was too late. Every normal response was too slow for the situation unfolding. She knew clearly, if she didn't act immediately, she might witness a horrific tragedy right in front of her. Her heart was pounding, but her feet moved forward as if someone inside her was urging her on. Ignoring all the warnings from training that employees must stay in position, Amara quickly moved toward the boy. As she got closer, she called out in a familiar voice, "Barron, where have you been? Grandma is waiting for you on the second floor." Her voice was loud enough for people around to hear, making the situation look like a normal reunion. And in that moment, she subtly tilted her head, whispering through her lips as she neared him, "Someone's following you. Don't look back. Follow me now." She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew turning back was no longer an option. Barron hesitated for a moment. His eyes were still uncertain, confused, but something in Amara's voice, the absolute certainty in it, made him trust her. A slight nod and the two quickly turned and headed down a narrow staff-only corridor, a space customers weren't allowed to enter. Amara gripped her security badge, trembling, pressing it to the scanner. A beep sounded. The heavy steel door slid open, swallowing them into the cold, dark back storage area. No more bright lights or cheerful laughter, just the sound of hurried footsteps and quick breaths echoing in the narrow space. Amara pulled Barron as they raced through the shortcut she had memorized after months of working there. She didn't look back, but she could feel the men closing in behind them. When they burst through a door leading to the security area, security personnel appeared just in time, blocking the way. But when she turned back, the two men had vanished as if they'd never existed. Amara thought that when everything was over, she would breathe a sigh of relief. She didn't expect praise or accolades. She just wanted to continue working, go home, tell her grandmother the story, and let tomorrow come as usual. But real life wasn't like the book she had read. No one complimented her. No one thanked her. And a few hours later, when the shopping center was beginning to empty, a message from her manager appeared on her phone. "Come to the office. Urgent." In the cold office, the manager didn't look her in the eye. On the desk were internal files, the shift schedule, and the rules clearly displayed behind him as an unspoken reminder. "Amara," he said, his voice flat as if he had repeated this line to many others before her. "You've seriously violated the operating procedures. You left your post without authorization, used restricted staff-only paths, and left your station unattended during peak hours. This behavior is unacceptable." Amara opened her mouth, ready to explain, but the words died on her lips when he slid a paper toward her. "Termination effective immediately." She didn't say anything. She didn't cry right then. She simply lowered her head, quietly packed her things, and walked out of the shopping center like a shadow. It was just the deadly silence of those who were best at making everything disappear. As the helicopter soared, carrying her and her grandmother away from the ground, Amara realized that she had just stepped into a much bigger game, and the scariest thing was, they hadn't stopped yet. After 3 days that felt like a nightmare, the sweep was over. More than 10 members of the transnational kidnapping ring were captured, and their secret bases in New Jersey and Philadelphia were sealed off. But what made Amara freeze when she was informed wasn't the scale of the organization, but who was behind it. Mr. Carter, the security supervisor at Diamond Center, who had once looked at her with a cold stare and pushed the termination letter toward her as if she were just a number in the system, turned out to be an insider for the organization. He had quietly provided blueprints of the center, locations of blind spots in the cameras, VIP routes, and coordinated the security breach just when Barron Trump showed up. Amara didn't know what to feel: anger, disappointment, or relief. The only thing she was sure of was that her instincts had been right. If she hadn't stopped that day, if she hadn't trusted her gut, things might have gone in an entirely different direction, and perhaps she would have carried the regret for the rest of her life for seeing something and doing nothing. On the fourth morning, Amara was taken to a federal security base, where not only was her safety ensured, but she was also informed of something that left her stunned. A man in uniform walked up to her, took her hand in his and said, "Amara Jackson, on behalf of the United States government, we sincerely thank you. Your actions have not only saved a life, but also uncovered a dangerous criminal network that has been operating for years." He pulled out a file and placed it on the table. "We've contacted 3 prestigious universities. You've been awarded a full scholarship, any major you choose. And if you still dream of becoming a cardiologist, know that you now have a real opportunity." Amara stood in shock. Beside her, Grandma Louise choked back tears, holding her granddaughter's hand tightly. But that wasn't all. The hospital where Grandma was receiving treatment announced that all medication and long-term treatment costs would be covered by a special fund from the Department of Health, because of the heroic contribution of the Amara family in protecting national security. That afternoon, when Amara returned to her old apartment to gather her things, she stood frozen for a moment in the hallway on the 3rd floor. Everything still looked old, suffocating, and covered in dust. But inside her, everything had changed, because now she was no longer the quiet grocery store worker. She was someone who had chosen to act, even if it meant losing everything. And now, she had it all back. On the table, the termination letter still lay there, but beside it was the thank you letter with a red presidential seal and the confirmation card for the honorary medical scholarship. Amara folded both of them and placed them in a small box, because she knew what makes someone a hero isn't the title or the reward. It's the moment they dare to stop when everyone else just walks by. That morning, Amara stood in front of the mirror, her hands trembling slightly as she buttoned her white shirt. Today was the day of her scholarship interview, the official opening of the path to becoming the cardiologist she had always dreamed of. Grandma Louise sat on the sofa, her eyes glistening with tears, watching every movement of her granddaughter. No one said anything, but the whole room felt still with emotion. With only 10 minutes left before she had to leave, Amara's phone suddenly buzzed. A message from an unnamed account, with no profile picture, just a string of strange numbers. She opened it, her heart stopping. "I've been watching you for a long time, ever since the day you shared your lunch with the homeless man outside the center. A good heart is something that can't be taught. We need people like you, and the world needs them too." Amara stood frozen, her eyes beginning to blur with tears. She remembered that day, a scorching noon. She only had a sandwich and a small box of milk. But when she saw the old man huddled outside the center, she split her meal without thinking. She never imagined that such a quiet act would be noticed by someone. She smiled and placed her hand on her chest. It wasn't the big things, but the small, silent choices each day that truly defined who she was. Today, Amara wasn't just going into the interview as a candidate. She was going in as proof that kindness is always seen and always deserves recognition. Amara had once lived with a simple wish to make enough money to buy her grandmother's heart medication so she could live one more day, breathe one more breath without pain. She had never dared to dream big. College was just a distant, shining image she feared she could never reach. But then just because of one moment of stopping, one uncalculated choice, she had saved an important life. And more than that, opened up a path she never dared to imagine before. She never sought recognition, never acted to be rewarded, but it was that unconditional kindness that brought her exactly where she needed to be. In a world that was too fast, where kindness was sometimes seen as weakness, Amara proved that doing the right thing, even at a cost, is always the right path. Because sometimes what changes our life isn't a miracle, but the moment we choose not to turn our back on others. And it was in that moment that Amara chose to become the best version of herself. Amara walked out of the interview room with a soft smile on her face, the afternoon sunlight shining through the window like a blessing. Her life had turned a page, not because of luck, but because of a courageous choice in an unexpected moment. The lesson from Amara's story is clear. Sometimes the right thing isn't the easy thing. But if we dare to stop when everyone else passes by, dare to act when others remain silent, that kindness, sooner or later, will be rewarded, and it might even change the world.